Too little too late. Zimbabwe massacre survivors cry foul. For more than 40 years, Bongani, Ncube, and Patricia Baleni have carried the pain of losing their father in the Matabeleland massacres, in which thousands of Zimbabweans were murdered in the 1980s. But neither believe village-level hearings launched by the President Emmerson Mnangagwa in July as a pilgrimage towards healing will bring closure. Ncube said he was 3 when soldiers shot his father a few meters from their home in Matabeleland North province in 1983, the year the then Prime Minister Robert Mugabe sent troops to crush dissent in ethnic Ndebele heartland. Mugabe had claimed Joshua Nkomo, his old ally in the fight against white rule, who drew much of his support from Matabeleland, was plotting against him. Ncube's father was a government veterinary worker and local leader of Nkomo's ZAPU party, the main target of the red-berets unit deployed by Mugabe, head of the mostly Shona ZANU party. In his pajamas, Baleni last saw her father, a school teacher, in 1983 when she was 19. Armed men dragged him from their home in Midlands in the dead at night, she told AFP. They took him in his pajamas with no shoes. Just outside the house were some blood stains. Relatives, other teachers and students scoured the bush but never found Clement Baleni, who was not known to be politically active. The family fled the area in fear, losing possessions and livestock. No definitive death toll has been established, but Mugabe's 5th Brigade, trained by North Korean instructors, is established to have killed up to 20,000 people between 1983 and 1987. Civilians were tortured, raped and forced from their homes in the operations named Gukurahundi, a Shona term that loosely translates as the early rain that washes away the chaff. Previous government attempts at addressing the killings have been feeble. The findings of 2 commissions of inquiry set up by Mugabe in the 1980s have never been made public. There have never been a government apology, and Mugabe did not acknowledge responsibility before he died in 2019. 2 months since the new process was announced, survivors have not been informed about them or invited to take part, Ncube said. For purposes of transparency and a show of sincerity, such a process should be centered on survivors and not be led by the state because some of the actors were heavily involved in the massacres, he told AFP. Public relations. Many questions Mnangagwa's sincerity of announcing the new initiative. President since 2017, he was National Security Minister at the time. A fierce critic and traditional leader Ndebele, exiled in Britain, for whom Gukurahundi was an attempted Ndebele genocide. It is a fertile public relations exercise meant to hoodwink people into believing that something is being done, but in reality, it's a nullity, he said. The ZAPU party refuses to take part. The hearings can go ahead and those who wish to can participate in them, but the whole scheme is flawed and, as ZAPU, we won't take part, Party Secretary Ntulisi Hanana told AFP. Midland State University Conflict Resolution lecturer author Chikerema said Mnangagwa may be trying to burnish his legacy and the announcement of hearings may be more tactical than tactful. It has not been made clear whether the process will result in justice or compensation, both desirous aspects of reconciliation, he said. Instead of wanting to be a Father Christmas or knight in shining armor, the president should have allowed for the establishment of an independent truth-telling commission which would result in genuine reconciliation, not this facade, Chikerema said. But a coalition of human rights organizations sees this new attempt to address Gukurahundi as a noble cause. In traditional justice, there is a principle known as working with the grain, meaning that even if a process is flawed, it is a foundation which can be built upon, said National Transitional Justice Working Group NTJWG coordinator Fortune Kuhutsebwe. In the meantime, monkeypox killed 6 other Cameroon cases. Cases of monkeypox virus have killed 2 people in the Cameroon since April, with 6 further and 40 other suspected cases, the Health Ministry said Wednesday. Since the resurgence of this disease in April 2024, the country has recorded 46 suspected cases of monkeypox, 6 of which are confirmed, with 2 deaths reported, Health Minister Malachi Monodwa said. However, the epidemic is not linked to the new, more virulent strain, Clade 1b, the ministry said. The World Health Organization declared an international emergency over monkeypox 4 weeks ago after the surge in cases of the Clade 1b strain in DR Congo, which spread to neighboring countries. Since then, Cameroonian authorities have strengthened surveillance, vaccinations, and awareness measures to prevent a possible local outbreak, the ministry said. At the end of last month, mpox was recorded as present in 14 African countries. Monkeypox is caused by a virus transmitted to humans by infected animals but can also be passed from human to human through close physical contact. It causes fever, muscular aches, and large boil-like skin lesions, and can in some cases be deadly. So far, 796 cases have been logged in Burundi, 162 in Congo-Brazzaville, and 45 in the Central African Republic, according to the African Center of Disease Control and Prevention (CDC). The Democratic Republic of Congo is considered the epicenter of the epidemic. According to the latest Congolese Public Health Institute figures, there have been nearly 22,000 cases and 716 deaths linked to the virus recorded since January. Some 3.6 million vaccines in total for African countries have been secured, according to the CDC, and first batches are being distributed. Meanwhile, genitalia from girls mutilated in Ivory Coast sold for magic. When he was a witch doctor, Moussa Diallo, who regularly smeared himself in a lotion made from a clitoris cut from a girl subjected to female genital mutilation. I wanted to be a big chief, I wanted to dominate, said the small but charismatic 50-something from Northwest Ivory Coast. I put it on my face and body every 3 months or so for about 3 years, said Diallo, who asked AFP not to use his real name. Genitalia cut from girls in illegal circumcision ceremonies is used in several regions of the West African countries to make love potions or magic ointments that some believe will help them make money or reach high political office, said Labe Gnebo, head of the National Organization for Women, Children and the Family, or NEF. A ground-down clitoris could sell for up to around $170, which is 152 euros, or around 3,046 rand, the equivalent of what many in Ivory Coast earn in a month. Diallo stopped using the actions a decade ago, but Regional Police Chief Lieutenant Nguessan Yoso confirmed to AFP that dried clitoris are still very sought after for mystical practices. And it is clear from extensive interviews AFP conducted with former faith healers, circumcisers, social workers, researchers, and NGOs that there is a thriving traffic in female genitalia for the powers they supposedly impart. Many are convinced the trade is hampering the fight against the female genital mutilation (FGM), which has been banned in the religiously diverse nation for more than a quarter of a century. Despite that, 1 in 5 Ivorian women are still being cut, according to the OECD, with 1 in 2 being mutilated in parts of the north. cut and mixed with plants. Before he had a crisis of conscience and decided to campaign against FGM, Diallo said he was often asked by the women who performed excisions around the small town of Tuba to use his powers to protect them from evil spells. Female circumcision has been practiced by different religions in West Africa for centuries, with most girls cut between childhood and adolescence. Many families consider it a rite of passage or a way to control and repress female sexuality, according to UN Children's Agency UNICEF, which condemns cutting as a dangerous violation of girls' fundamental rights. Beyond the physical and psychological pain, cutting can be fatal, lead to sterility, birth complications, chronic infections and bleeding, not to mention the loss of sexual pleasure. Diallo would often accompany the women who do the cutting out into the forest or to a home where dozens of girls would be circumcised, often surrounded by fetishes and sacred objects. So it was relatively easy for the former faith healer to obtain the precious power. When they would cut the clitorises, they would dry them for a month or two, then pound them with stones, he said. The result was a black powder, which was then sometimes mixed with leaves, roots, and bark or shea butter that is often used in cosmetics. They could then sell it for around 100,000 CFA francs, which is 152 euros or around 3,059 rand if the girl was a virgin, or 65,000, which is 99 euros or around 1,954 rand if she already had a child, or barter it for goods and services, Diallo added. The ex-witch doctor said he was able to get some of the powder recently, a mix of human flesh and plants, he believes, from a cutter in this village. AFP has shown the powder but was unable to analyze it without buying it. Organ trafficking. Former circumcisers interviewed by AFP insisted that clitorises cut from girls are either buried, thrown into a river, or given to the parents depending on local custom. But one in the west of the country admitted some end up being used for magic. Some people pretend they are the girl's parents and go off with a clitoris, she said. Witch doctors use them for incantations and sell them afterwards, she claimed. Another circumciser said some of her colleagues were complicit in the trade, giving genitalia to people who were up to no good for occult purposes. Mutilated when she was still a child, one victim told AFP that her mother wanted her to bring home the flesh that had been cut. The trade is regarded as organ trafficking in Ivorian law and is punishable, like FGM, with fines and several years in prison, said lawyer Marie-Laurence Didier-Zeze. But police in ODNA, who are in charge of 5 regions in the country's northwest, said no one has ever been indicted for trafficking. People won't say anything about sacred practices, lamented Lieutenant Nguensan Yaso. The cutters themselves are both feared and respected, locals told AFP, often seen as prisoners of evil spirits. Just nuts. A clitoris cannot give you magical powers. It's just nuts, said genetologist Jacqueline Chanin, based in the country's commercial capital, Abidjan. Even so, the practice is still stubbornly widespread in some parts of the country, according to researchers. Dieudonné Kouodio, an anthropologist specializing in health, was presented with a box of the power in the town of Odione, 150 kilometers north of Tuba. It contained a dried cut organ in the form of a blackish powder, he said. His discovery was included in a 2021 report for the Jiugui Foundation, whose conclusions were accepted by the Ministry of Women. Farmers in Ndebele district, of which or DNA is a part, buy clitorises and mix the powder with their seeds to increase the fertility of their fields, said Nuo Konate, a Jigul Foundation member who had been fighting FGM in the area for 16 years. He said parents of young girls were gutted when he told them of the trafficking. Further south and in the center-west of the country, women use clitoris powder as an aphrodisiac, hoping to prevent their husbands straying, said criminologist Safi Rosalinda, author of a 2023 study of FGM, which also pointed to the trade. She and her two co-authors discovered that blood from cat women was also being used to honor traditional gods. They are far from the only Ivorian folks remedies that use body parts, according to lawyer DDR Zeze. Mystic beliefs keeps it going. The mystic has a central place in daily life in the Ivory Coast, where Islam, Christianity, and traditional animist belief coexist, said the Canadian anthropologist Boris Kornick, a specialist in occult practices there. It touches every sphere of people's social, professional, family, and love lives, he said, and there is generally nothing illegal about it. The trade, however, is one of the reasons that FGM survives in the Ivory Coast, NGOs argue, where the rate of cutting is generally falling and is below the West African average of 28%, according to the OECD. Back near Toba, the former witch Dr. Diallo recalled how up to 30 women will be cut in a day in the places his magic protected. The dry season between January to March was a favored period for circumcisions when the hot Harmattan wind from the Sahara helps scars heal, he said. Staff at the region's only social work center say the cutting is still going on but hard to quantify because it never happens in the open. Instead, it goes on in secret, hidden behind traditional festivals which have nothing to do with the practice, kept going, they say, by circumcisers from neighboring Guinea, only a few kilometers away, where FMG rates are over 90%. And that's it from INJIBS Africa. Stay tuned to our USA and political updates.